না বলবো। তো সেই জন্য আর সাহায্য চাওয়ার মতো সুযোগ আছে যখন আল্লাহর কাছে একটু সাহায্য চাইব, কারণ এসব মাহফিল খুঁজে পাওয়া খুব মুশকিল। আর এসব মাহফিলে তেনারাই আসবে যেনারা আল্লাহকে ভালোবাসে, আমার নবীকে ভালোবাসে। আপনারা সব ঈমানদার তো নাকি, মুত্তাকি তো নাকি? যাক আলহামদুলিল্লাহ। আমি আলোচনা শুরু করবার পূর্বে গ্রামবাসী আমার বাপেদের বলবো, আমার ভাইদের বলবো, আপনারা সকলে আসেন। আর এই জায়গায় বসতে গেলে হার হাকিকাতে পরিচয় পাওয়া যাবে। দেখবেন এই জায়গায় অনেক মানুষ এসে বসেন, মাথার যন্ত্রণা হয়, কোমরের যন্ত্রণা হয়, হাঁটুর যন্ত্রণা হয়, এসব হয় না? হয় না? এই জায়গায় বসলেই হয়। কেন বলুন তো? এটা এমন একটা জায়গা, ইবলিস শয়তান দেখলেই মাথা গরম হয়ে যায়, দেখলেই মাথা গরম। প্রথমেই বলে দেয় আল্লাহর বান্দারা সব আল্লাহর জিকির করছে, নবীর নামে দরুদ পড়ছে, তবে ইবলিসদের মধ্যেও ভালো আছে। কথা বুঝছেন? এই সূত্র যখন এসেছে একটুখানি আওয়াজ দিয়ে বলে দিচ্ছি, তা আমরা ইবলিসের পক্ষে না আল্লাহর পক্ষে? আলহামদুলিল্লাহ। আল্লাহর পক্ষে যারা থাকবে মউত পর্যন্ত আল্লাহকে ভালোবেসে যাবে। নবী মুহাম্মদ মুস্তাফা যে রাস্তা দেখিয়েছে সেই রাস্তায় তারা চলবে। আমরা মউত পর্যন্ত আল্লাহ আল্লাহ রাসূলের পক্ষে থাকবো ইনশাআল্লাহ। যাক আলহামদুলিল্লাহ। তাই বলবো, ইবলিসের পক্ষে না থেকে আল্লাহর পক্ষে থাকতে গেলে এই জায়গায় এসে বসতে হবে। আল্লাহ পাক তবেই রাজি হবে, তবেই খুশি হবে। যাক, এই নিয়ে আলোচনা করব। আপনারা সব চলে আসুন, একদম কেউ বাড়িতে থাকবেন। যদি কোনো হাজত থাকে আপনাদের, আপনারা আস্তে আস্তে করে যান, হাজত সেরে আবার চলে আসুন। বাইতুল খালাতে গিয়ে আপনারা হাজত সেরে আবার এসে বসে বসুন, তবে চলে যাবেন না। কারণ দেখুন, আমরা এসেছি 1.5 ঘন্টা 2 ঘন্টার মেহমান, বা আমাদেরকে দাওয়াত করে নেওয়া হয়েছে, ইস্তেখান দাওয়াত, বিশেষ করে আমাদেরকে বলার জন্য নিয়ে আসা হয়েছে। আমরা বলবো, 2 ঘন্টা থাকবো, আপনাদের কাছ থেকে বিদায় নিয়ে চলে যাবো। পরের বছর আসবো কি না আসবো, তার পরের বছর আসবো, সেটা কোনো বড় কথা নয়। তবে আল্লাহ পাক আমাদেরকে বসিয়েছেন মানে আল্লাহকে রাজি খুশি করতে হবে। কথা ঠিক না? বলে আজকের আল্লাহকে রাজি খুশি করব, কাল মরে যাব। আল্লাহ পাক আমার আপনার প্রতি রাজি হয়ে গেলে কবর, হাসর, আল্লাহ সমস্ত জায়গা, ওয়াসালাসাত, দুনিয়া, কবর আর হাসর, আল্লাহ পাক নাজাত করে দেবে। কথা বুঝছেন আমার? এই জায়গায় আসেন, মাশাআল্লাহ খুব বড় জলসা। আমি রাস্তা দিয়ে আসছিলাম, অনেক মানুষ ঘোরাফেরা করছেন। কেন ভাই, আজকের এত সুন্দর মাহফিল পাওয়ার পরে যদি সমস্ত জায়গায় না উম্মতে মুহাম্মাদিরা বসে, তাহলে কোথায় গিয়ে বসবে? কোথায় গিয়ে ওরা আড্ডা মারবে? খুব খারাপ লাগে। আসেন না, কি আছে, একটা দিনের ব্যাপার তো, একটা রাত তো। যাই হোক, আসেন। আউযু বিল্লাহি মিনাশ শাইতানির রাজীম। বাবা নাম্বার দুনি তো, হ্যাঁ ওটা দেবেন। বিসমিল্লাহির রহমানির রহিম।
There is an African proverb which says, if you educate a woman, you educate a generation or a nation.
Armed with a never say die attitude, learnings from brilliant mentors, and a knack of building the perfect team, my next guest has braved every challenge and made her mark in the banking industry. Today, we dive deep into the impact of digital adoption and the future of finance industry with Zareen Daruwala, CEO of Standard Chartered Bank, India.
So Zareen, first of all, let me thank you for agreeing to have dialogues with me. It's a pleasure to see you again. And I also want to thank the entire team here at Standard Chartered Bank for hosting us here at the headquarters. I must say that it's a beautiful office here. And to begin with the conversation, last couple of years have been a huge challenge for the world. And, I've personally taken steps to resume the normal operations in a methodical manner over last couple of years. And when we look at various sectors operating out there, possibly after healthcare, banking was the sector which was taking steps to ensure that these services continue. And I'm sure you would have faced plenty lot of challenges. And for us, I think one perspective has been that how we can look at this adversity as an opportunity. And a lot of insights have started to evolve, and we'll talk about that as we go forward in the conversation. But quick reflections, how the couple of years gone by have been for you?
First of all, thank you, Manish, for inviting me to join this Duologues. I happened to see 3-4 videos, and I must say I was very impressed with the kind of people that you managed to bring and the kind of dialogues that you've had. So, and also Panasonic is a brand that I can relate to. My first washing machine in my house, good old days, was a Panasonic one.
Thank
and we have fond memories of the durability and the quality. So I'm sure Panasonic epitomizes that. Coming to last 2 years, I must say that as a bank, which is a global bank, it started in China, and because of that, as a bank, we had started planning a little bit. Having said that, I don't think any of us anticipated the severe lockdown that we faced in March end. And I think it coincided with March ending for corporates. All corporates have their financial closure March ending. And the lockdown, I think, was just 10 days before that. So that was a period where we had to get our act quite quickly together. While we had started doing scenario planning and disaster recovery and things like that, none of us were prepared for the sudden lockdown. So I think a couple of things that we had to do very, very rapidly. The first thing was to get the call center operating remotely. And that was not easy because, you know, technology, you have everybody sitting at their home, and when calls come, how do you direct calls to people at their different locations where they're operating from home? The second thing that we did was virtual desktop infrastructure where people could sort of access the systems from home. The third thing we did was bring your own device kind of thing, where people's own devices could be used to access the bank systems. And another thing that thankfully I'd done, because of our scenario planning, we had ordered a lot of laptops. Afterwards, there was a huge shortage because everybody wanted to buy laptops. So we could give a lot of our colleagues laptops when the lockdown happened. So partly planned, I would say, partly unplanned. I think the important thing for me in that period was 2-3 very important things. How do you take safety of your colleagues and health very seriously? And all our colleagues had to, like healthcare workers, be there throughout the year, throughout last 2 years. And safety of our employees was paramount for me. Wave 2 was the period where I think it tested everybody's, you know, I would say the human part of the, you know, every leader. And for me, that period was all about focusing on employees. Business took a secondary place. And the way, you know, we sort of reached out to our employees and how we sort of took care of them. I think when the COVID wave settled, employees came back and gave such a fantastic performance that Stanchart India last year did its best ever profits. So, you know, if you take care of your employees, they give back wholeheartedly. That's the experience. The other big learning was, or for me, I created a working group and I told them, don't come to me for decisions. You guys are the closest to what is happening on the ground. You take all your calls. I will back you, whatever call you take. So, you know, you find that when you empower people and they really rise to the occasion. So that was quite a good experience. The third thing was how do you, because customers are not able to give wet signature, how do you sort of ensure that customer transactions happen seamlessly? And some of the customers had not embraced digital, but they wanted to do manual. So how do you enable customer transactions to happen? So how do you rewrite all your processes? How do you make customers onboard digitally in the lockdown period, because afterwards customers were forced to be digital. So these were big learnings, and one good outcome of all this was the customer digitization accelerated rapidly. I would say 2-3 years got done in 2-3 months, kind of the embracing of digital. And I think the last thing was, how do you help society? That was one big thing. So we worked with IIT Kanpur to develop a low-cost ventilator. And that was about 3.5-4 lakhs, while a normal ventilator would be 15-16 lakhs. And we helped them develop it and commercialize it. And thankfully, about 3,500 of those are now deployed. And hospitals could afford it. 15-16 lakh, how many hospitals can afford that kind of ventilator? So we worked a lot with a lot of NGOs, whether it was food or any which way, we could help. We helped a lot of the NGOs. Thankfully, given the CSR budget that we have, we could really use it very fruitfully for this period. So a different experience, I would say, last 2 years.
Absolutely. You spoke about digitalization, how it has accelerated, specifically in last couple of years. Potentially, digital convergence started to happen roughly about 25 years before. And in our case also, the incremental disruptions which were continuing to happen over last 20-25 years, and some specific learnings of last couple of years have created a situation where we are seriously looking at a lot of things, including the way we operate, the structure which should exist, the processes they should be followed. The business models are getting revisited. From a product oriented approach, we are moving to solution oriented approach. In some sense, for banking sector, this may mean that many organizations like ours may not specifically look at CAPEX as a business model, but may look at OPEX based business models in the time to come. When it comes to digitization, specifically in last couple of years, as you rightly mentioned, that the change which was supposed to happen over next 3 to 5 years has happened in last couple of years. Insights like consumers, in our case, are preferring appliances which are helping them multitask while they've stayed within their premises for a long period. So a lot is changing, and the responsibility with leaders and organizations is to ensure that not only this catch up happens, but also we kind of lead and create examples and set certain benchmarks. On the other hand, in last couple of years, we have also seen that how startups have tried to create a great difference in people's life, in the way businesses happen, fintech in particular. So would you share some of your experiences and views on how banking sector can look at partnership with these fintech companies? And I believe that technology anyway, big tech is going to play a major role, including the ones which will impact the way banks operate. So any reflections on that?
I think clearly fintechs will be constantly disruptive, and I think it's in a way a competition that ensures that banks keep upping their ante on their digital investments and keep sort of improvising. So to that extent, I would say it has enabled banks to really get their act together on accelerating the digital journey. Having said that, I would say banks are in a business which is based on trust, and they are regulated. So from a customer lens, banks sort of give them comfort on cybersecurity, data privacy, their money is safe. So clearly there is a niche for banks, but there is a niche for fintechs also. So fintechs clearly on the payment side, they have accelerated the wallets, etc. So there are places where fintechs will play, and there are places where banks will play. There will be intersection also, and there'll be partnership also. In our case, we've actually taken the approach to partner with a lot of fintechs. For example, many places where we partnered, one of the examples is in our early warning signals. If we partnered with a fintech where any external event that happens, suppose a case is filed against a client anywhere in India, immediately we come to know. So we don't depend on our relationship manager with a lag of few days to come and tell us. This has really enabled us to have really 24/7 kind of monitoring of our client portfolio. We have even invested. We have a Standard Chartered Ventures, which focuses on working with fintechs, and it has also sort of launched the first digital bank in Hong Kong, and we are going to be launching our second digital only bank in Singapore. So Standard Chartered Ventures has also invested in some of the fintechs where we see a partnership. So I would say that it is a partnership plus competition. Stanchart, in fact, has the highest adoption of digital in India. 73% of our customers are digital, yeah. And that is almost 10% higher than the industry average. In corporates, we have 99.7% digital adoption now. So yeah, I think the has just, as I said, accelerated the digital adoption. And for customers, it's really enabled their business to sort of function in this period of when most of their own employees would be operating from home. So I would say that it has been a partnership plus competition kind of play with fintechs.
Our country is like full of opportunities, and coming to the current economic environment of our country, last few years in specific, and also in my role into FICCI, being the chair of the Electronics Manufacturing Committee and the Energy Storage Committee, I've been working very closely with industry and also with the government, and in specific the agenda of Atmanirbhar Bharat. And clearly the priorities have been defined, and specific to, for example, our sector, the necessity is to, one, unlock the potential of the country, specifically for the demand. For example, for the sector of air conditioners, we are just about 6% penetration into households of the country. This is immense potential in the time to come. And consumption, for sure, the potential again is very, very large. And there have been certain challenges in specific the last few years. The geopolitical environment, the way it has evolved specifically in the last few years, the impact of commodities into cost of goods, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, we have the recent budget coming up, and last 3 years in specific, I see that there has been a methodical approach where priorities are very clearly defined. And this year, I think there is a large allocation on capex infrastructure. How do you see the recent economic environment, and if at all, certain reflections on the recent budget?
So if we look at the services sector, it has just come back to the pre levels, while for industrial, it has surpassed the pre levels. I think services is also because of high touch sectors where they got sort of badly impacted. Having said that, I think this budget really has given a big boost to capex. Like you mentioned, 2.9% of GDP is a very, very high capex allocation. In fact, if you look at USA, roads actually has been, it is said that roads was the second highest contributor to the increase or acceleration in US GDP after education. And there is the Eisenhower index, which says that the multiplier for roads was 6 times. And it's proven that even railways investment is 6x multiplier effect. Similarly, housing has very, very high impact on steel and cement, like we all know. So to that extent, it is hoped that the multiplier impact that we'll see will come maybe with a little bit of lag, because and also the hope the government has is that this will crowd in private sector investment. Now, private sector investment will not happen unless capacity utilization touches 75%. Today, it's below 70%. The other thing, which is from a banking standpoint, if you look at 6 years back and now, the banking sector is much more robust. Capital adequacy is in excess of 16%. Gross NPAs and net NPAs have come down very sharply. So banking sector is clearly in a position to support should this capex credit demand come up. In fact, January we saw pretty good lift in credit demand. So I'm hoping that things will be better. China, it obviously grew double digit for decades. China had the benefit of having grown when the whole global economy was much more open. Today there's a huge deglobalization, and when India is sort of poised for growth, China had the benefit of exports as a big lever, which perhaps India may not have the same amount of leverage. With all countries sort of looking at deglobalization. So the domestic demand has to be sort of robust enough to absorb a lot of the manufacturing capacity that will come up thanks to the PLI scheme, etc.
So, moving on to the discussion, to take some reflections on your professional life and subsequently some of the aspects of your life itself, would you share your journey with Standard Chartered Bank in last few years? We have seen that how with your team have looked at rapid transformation. We spoke about how digitization is cutting across variety of operations, how customers have become more empowered, finding it more efficient to deal for their transactions. Small and medium enterprise in the country is looking at easy access to finance. So your journey in specific to last few years into the bank and some of the anecdotes or experiences if you like to share.
So I joined in April 2016, and just 1 year before that, Standard Chartered India had posted the highest ever loss. So it was quite an interesting journey for me last 6 years. And last year, which is calendar year 2021, Standard Chartered was amongst the top 3 markets in terms of operating profits for Standard Chartered. In 2020, we were the second most profitable market. So to that extent, it's been very, very fulfilling. And I would say many things I had to do. So I would start with the corporate side and then come to the retail side. So corporate banking, we had very high NPAs, non-performing assets. And the whole focus was how do you de-risk the book? And how do you have a culture where risk becomes owned by the front line? You always have a risk function, but first risk has to be owned by the front line. So what we did was we started working on, as I'd mentioned, early warning tools, worked with fintechs to build certain digital capabilities. Second thing, we hired industry experts to help us assess. So if we are onboarding a new customer, the industry expert will go with my relationship manager and go and see the plant. What is the quality? Is the plant overcapitalized, etc.? So, to be sure that what money customer is sort of asking, is it being spent for the right thing? How do you do monitoring? If you're given a guarantee for a construction company, how do you have somebody going on the ground and seeing whether the project is moving as per schedule? So, building a lot of tools and capabilities, physical and digital. And over time, I found we also worked with a forensic company who would help us on new to bank onboardings. And over time, I found that the frontline itself was able to analyze risk far, far better than what it was a few years back. And touch wood, this last cycle, we hardly had any accidents on any corporates. So that really showed that the portfolio is resilient. I think the test is in a downward cycle when your portfolio behaves. On the retail side, I would say when I joined, we were behind a lot of competition in terms of our digital capabilities. So it was about investing in the digital capabilities. And in retail, it's all about you have to do 1,000 things, not few big things, because every little thing sort of adds up. So, how do you make your credit card proposition attractive? How do you have your best call center service? In fact, Stanchart has one of the best net promoter scores in India in terms of customer service. So if you want to have high-end customers, what is your value proposition? Are you giving a good wealth proposition to your high-end customers? We launched non-resident Indian offering.
Okay.
We focused on CASA, which is current account savings account, which is cheap money. And when I joined, we had CASA, which was just 32%. Today, we are more than 50% CASA, which is higher than a lot of other banks. And that has ensured that our cost of funds comes down. And once your cost of funds comes down, your margins are much better. We launched trust association societies, clubs as another medium to get low-cost deposits. So multiple things were rolled out. And at the same time, what I did was I worked with the teams to have a culture change. And the change was how do we simplify the processes. So what I did was I call them change agents. So the middle management of the bank, I felt had a connect with the top and with the last man standing. And they were typically the middle management, and each of them ran with complex processes. how to simplify that, how to improve our turnaround time, how to remove unnecessary processes. And the other thing that I did was what I call voice of frontline. So I would call people 50, 70 in a room, and I would tell them, tell me all your pain points. I remember the first one that I did, it went on for 4 hours, and we had to stop it because it became too late in the night. And I called my entire top team and I said, you listen to the pain of the front line.
Yeah.
Only if you listen, you will know what
Yeah.
the front line goes through. And if your front line is not happy, you're not going to get anywhere, right? So it's all about helping them, enabling them, and how do you make things simpler and reduce their frustration. So cultural change plus hard investments plus many things, and it's quite fulfilling journey, I would say, for me.
Excellent. So in every individual, like, whether it is leaders or any individual, is kind of sum total of their experiences. People we meet, the experiences we encounter, and how we learn from those experiences. I'm sure it would be in your case also. And the reflections specifically of last 5-6 years into Standard Chartered Banks, which you have shared, the approach would have been what you would have learned in your professional life, and also received mentorship, or I've looked up to a lot of leaders in my past, and I still continue to follow their advice. And wherever I have to look at a particular situation, I may refer. So Konosuke Matsushita, for example, the founder of Panasonic Corporation, is someone I really look up to. His life, his basic business philosophy continues to inspire me, and I'm sure that would be in your case also. Would you like to share some of your experiences, some people you've worked with, and the learnings which you've acquired in your professional life gone by?
So I think a lot of people know ICICI Bank has been a very good training ground, and has produced, it's like the Unilever in the financial services space. There would be even today maybe 20 to 25 CEOs even today in the financial services space who are ex-ICICI, maybe even more, whether it's insurance, mutual fund, it's like a factory of producing leaders. So I've been very, very fortunate to have worked with people who have really like doyens of the banking industry. So my first boss was a lady called Lalita Gupte. She went on to become the joint managing director of ICICI Bank, and she was a deputy general manager when I joined. I think the first thing that I picked up from her was two takeaways from her style of leadership. She would be able to pick up any error in your note. And when you're young, you don't have an eye for error.
True.
And that has ensured that every letter, anything that leaves my desk, even today I have a habit. Before I press the send button on an email, I will read it the second time. So that has really trained me. And today, even if I have a 100-page document, I can pick out errors. So that training that I got. The second thing that I learned from her was empathy. So, if you're working late, she would be very concerned. She would even send food for you to office. She would be concerned how you go home safely those days. So lot of empathy that she had, but at the same time quite tough when it comes to us demanding performance. The second person that I worked with, again, Mr. Wagul. I don't know, many people may not know, Mr. Wagul became chairman of Bank of India at the age of 40. And I don't think that record would have been surpassed even today, because at such a young age he became chairman of a nationalized bank. And then he came to ICICI at the age of, I think, 44, 45, that young. And with Mr. Wagul, one thing that I learned was humility. Actually, despite his stature and his brilliant sort of leadership, he was very, very humble, very rooted. And that's something I learned. I remember one experience where Mr. Wagul I was asked to do a document on Japan Bond Rating Institute. And I was a little late in going to give him, and he said, okay, we'll meet the next day. And in Bombay, when it rains. Those days there was no mobile. And because he had given me a promise, he actually turned up in office when Bombay was half flooded. And I did not make it. And I got a call at my house that, where are you? Mr. Wagul has already come to office. And I was really scared that he'll fire me. And he said, "I finished going through the document. These are my comments." So, it really showed sort of your respect for the person really goes up. And the kind of exposure I got to some of these people was fantastic. Then, of course, Mr. Kamath. Mr. Kamath had a very different leadership style, very, very, I mean, we used to fear getting into his room. That kind of very, very, if again, one error in your note or presentation and you will be sort of really torn to pieces. And I would say that leadership style really made us what we are, because everything had to be perfect with him. And if you go to his room, not one book will be out of place. If there's a pile of books, everything perfect, So absolute. And the second big learning for me was the boardroom engagement, because by then I'd become, when he was chairman, I was heading the wholesale bank, and the kind of vision that he had. Mr. Kamath was the one who sort of really, to me, has transformed the entire retail banking. He was the one who sort of started looking at launching credit cards, debit cards, ATMs, mortgage loans. Those days, there was only HDFC Limited who used to be a mortgage lender. Complete revolution in the Indian banking system, and a major visionary. So lots and lots of learnings for me from everybody.
Interesting. I can relate a lot with what you mentioned, and very similar experiences. And in our organization, as I said, that individuals are sum total of their experiences. So in our case, my personal learnings during my professional life has somehow created a framework. On one axis, on the character, one has to be ambitious, resilient, and humble. And on the other axis, we say 3 C's again: capability, which has to consistently evolve, this Japanese philosophy of Kaizen, which is consistent learning, continuous learning, and character and consistency. So based on this kind of framework, we are trying to create a culture within our organization which enables people to do better in their lives. So I'm very happy to hear what you shared with us. So moving on, I read through that you mentioned that poverty is one thing that you want to change in the world. And when I look back, for example, the founder of Panasonic Corporation, one of his philosophy was that technology should be like tap water. It should be available in abundance at affordable cost. And the basic business philosophy for our organization, which has existed for more than 70 years now, also says that recognizing our responsibilities as industrialists, we will devote ourselves for the progress and development of society and the well-being of its people. And so very similar reflections. So what are your reflections on when you say that this is one challenge you would like to take up?
So I was asked once that if there's one thing you would want to see changed in this world, what would it be? And I said poverty. I would say I would go back to poverty is very correlated to female literacy.
True.
And there is an African proverb which says, if you educate a woman, you educate a generation or a nation. And I would say that it is something that we have focused a lot in Standard Chartered on female literacy. And we work with a lot of NGOs, Teach for India, Akanksha, and many others on female literacy. And if we look at India, actually, one of the reasons